What's up everyone, and recently I just saw a really well made video by a YouTuber called November Hotel where he talked about the decline of Gambit, and that got me thinking because I for one really like Gambit, but I know there's a lot of people that are burnt out on it and just hate touching that thing, or whenever a quest requires players to go do something in Gambit, there's like an audible groan from the entire community. So I wanted to go in and try and fix what's wrong with Gambit so that more and more players are willing to give the mode a try and actually just play it for fun instead of being forced into it by quests and that sort of thing. So first of all, before I start talking about things that are wrong and how to fix Gambit, I just want to talk about my personal experience and thoughts on Gambit. I for one really enjoy Gambit, and I play more Gambit than I do almost any other mode in Destiny, specifically Gambit Prime, and that's just because I feel like it's one of the most competitive experiences you can get in the entire game. Between that and Trials, I think those are two of the most nail-biting experiences the entire game has to offer. But even with that really intense gameplay, the game can still become very monotonous and even burn me out, and I'm what I would consider to be one of the more avid Gambit players. So I want to talk about how I think Bungie could fix Gambit and help bring more players back to the playlist. From what I can tell from listening to people's complaints throughout the community with Gambit, people's main problem with the game are overpowered invasions, lack of variety from each game, and a lack of incentive to keep playing the mode. And I think Bungie could easily fix all of these problems. So to start with, let's talk about invaders. I think that invaders are a very easy thing that Bungie could fix. Basically, all they need to do is remove heavy weapons from invaders. Now, before you get mad about this is too far, like invaders are basically useless after this, no they're not. In the background you'll see me doing lots of invasions where I'm not using heavy weapons at all, but I am using my super and special weapons. So some people might say removing heavy weapons is only half the problem, they still have their supers. While yes, this is true, but supers are much easier to deal with than a heavy weapon. A heavy weapon is silent, you don't know where they're coming from. A super is very loud and bright, you can easily see it coming from a mile away. And also, getting your super is harder than getting a full magazine of heavy ammo. And also, when you don't have your super, you're forced to rely on your primary and secondary weapons. And those weapons require much more skill than, say, a heavy machine gun, a rocket launcher, or a sword. Basically, what this does is it makes invaders not necessarily less potent, but it makes the people that you're killing not as angry when you kill them. This would go a long way in offsetting that player fatigue that many players get when they play Gambit and just get shit on repeatedly by invaders. Also, while we're on the topic of Gambit being unforgiving, I'd like to talk about how since Gambit is a very high-skilled team-based mode, I think that Gambit should have a solo queue playlist, or at least just better matchmaking so that a team of a bunch of different solos is not matched up against a 4-stack, because that happens way too often currently, and those matches, unless the solos themselves are fairly good, it just turns into a complete shit show and all those solos just want to get off Gambit for the rest of the day. Okay, so now that we've made Gambit more forgiving and easy to play, let's talk about how to make Gambit more fun and give the game mode more variety. The reason Gambit needs more variety is that almost every single game is played the exact same way. You go bank the moats, do some invasions, kill the primeval, almost no mechanics besides that to think of, and it's just super simple. And while it can be really fun and really intense, I think the game mode could very much improve from some increased gameplay variety. One key place that Bungie could focus on gameplay variety is in map design. I think Gambit maps should be much more vertical than they currently are, and they should also have more intricate moving parts. Like for instance the map on Titan, how it has the wheel that kind of spins around that you can get from one part of the map to the other, or you can go back and forth on the spinny things to make yourself harder to hit for invaders. Like that just goes a long way in making that map a lot more replayable, and personally that's my favorite Gambit map to play on. Some other ideas I have for map variety are a map that's half in the Ascendant plane, half in the normal plane, where you go through those Ascendant portals to travel between. Or maybe a map that takes place in an old Golden Age factory that has some turrets that are by the bank that you can mount yourself and defend your bank that way. or a map that's big enough to have vehicles on, like have some pikes or some tanks and stuff, or let you summon your sparrow on it. That would make that map a lot more interesting and unique. And I'm not saying that all of these map ideas are fun, these are just things that I'm spitballing off the top of my head, and they could all be tweaked or adjusted to make into interesting map ideas. And I think if each map in Gambit had its own gimmick like that, it would make the mode a lot more interesting and replayable, as each match would be substantially different. Another thing that Gambit and Gambit Prime could both improve on is their boss variety. Now, they have plenty of different assets and stuff for the bosses, but what they need to do is make the different bosses each have their own mechanic. Take the meatball that gives you the Malfeasance quest. That is a prime example of how each boss should have its own kind of unique gimmick. And even in Gambit Prime, instead of beating the primeval like spawn thingies, there should be a different mechanic for each boss to start the damage phase. Like, that's a good idea for one boss, but have different ones for different bosses. For instance, if the boss is, say, the Taken Minotaur, you have to go hunt down this Vex hobgoblin or something that's hiding throughout the map to get a cranium that you can use to deplete the Minotaur's shield so you can start the damage phase. Or for the likeness of Nokris boss, he summons some of those crystals that you have to destroy, kind of like how they are in the Nokris strike, except they're hidden throughout the map, so you have to go hunt all of them down before you can start the next damage phase. These are just two examples of different boss mechanics that Bungie could implement for the different bosses for Gambit and Gambit Prime, and this combined with the increased map variety that I previously suggested would make each match of Gambit unique and different and make the game mode a lot more replayable. Now, finally, let's talk about incentives, which are the final main problem with Gambit and Gambit Prime that I'm going to talk about today. Basically, Gambit and Gambit Prime need more rewards and more loot that are exclusive to the modes. Now, I'm just going to say the obvious stuff real quick. The game needs a refresh of all of its loot, needs new armor, needs new weapons, preferably a new exotic quest similar to Malfeasance. That was really cool. And another thing that I think should actually apply to all Destiny modes, and would actually be a really cool addition, would be mode specific artifacts that give specific bonuses to the specific mode. Now, I'm not talking about the seasonal artifact that we currently have. I'm talking about an additional armor piece similar to the class item. It would be found right underneath it on the inventory screen. Players of Destiny 1 will remember the player artifact as well was a thing back then. And basically how I think it should work in Destiny 2 is you can get artifacts for different modes. For instance, in Gambit, you get an artifact that gives you like a bonus damage towards taken enemies, or in Crucible you get something like increases your radar distance or something like that, and it would give each mode a plethora of different artifacts that could give different bonuses that players could chase, and it would just introduce a bunch of new loot to the game. And personally, I think would be a great way to introduce armor perks, as you could introduce some pretty crazy perks without having to worry about breaking the meta in a different mode. For instance, you could get a crazy damage buff for your strike artifact, but it'll only work in strikes, so you don't have to worry about it breaking the game in Crucible. Or vice versa for like raids, Gambit, all sorts of different things, or just patrols in general. You get patrol artifacts. This thing, it honestly probably deserves its own video, but I'm just mentioning it here. But anyways, back to Gambit. This is a game mode that really just needs a little bit of love from Bungie. They just need to make it slightly more forgiving for solo players, make the game just slightly more varied from each mode through the map design and boss design, and then finally they just need to add some more loot and stuff that we can pursue through the mode, and that just goes for the entire game in general. And that's all I have for today. Please like if you like the video, and subscribe so you don't miss my next one. Thank you for checking out all the way through, and until next time, goodbye.